SSAS International Considerations. A few years ago I was teaching English in Japan, and one of my students asked me to share some American music with the class. So I decided to go to the local music shop. It was a huge store actually, and I asked them if they had any music from Lyle Lovett. And the person at the desk said, "Yeah, it's there, we have it." Everything was categorized A through Z, so I decided to look for the L's, and lo and behold, I could not find the L category. So I went back to the front desk and told them, "Look, I can't find Lyle Lovett, he should be under L." Then they laughed at me and they said, "No, that's under R, Lyle Lovett." The Japanese language has a completely different collation system from English. Collation has to do with the sorting of characters. So these international considerations are very important with SQL Server. In this nugget, we're going to talk about the base language as well as the collation settings. And then we'll talk about managing our different currencies. So if you have a currency lookup table and you want to display sales by different currencies, you can do that, and it will automatically be converted to the appropriate currency. Then the last thing we're going to talk about are translations. You can set up your SSAS project to use various translations in addition to the base language. The translation that is used will depend on the setting of the client's machine. I want to talk a little bit about SSAS language and collation settings. Collation has to do with the way data is sorted. So you can set this information either on the database level, you can also set it on the SSAS level. The way you want to set this up in SSAS is you actually open up your SQL Server Management Studio and just make sure that you connect to your Object Explorer and make sure that you choose Analysis Services as opposed to Database Engine or any of these other choices. So we'll say Analysis Services right there. Hit Connect, and you'll see here, in my case I have one server right here. I can right click on it and view my properties. Okay, so here are my properties right here, and you'll see we have general properties, language and collation settings, as well as security. Now any changes that you make to any of these are only going to take effect as soon as you restart the server, so keep that in mind. So let's hone in on the language collation. First of all, you'll see that my base language is English. If I want to change that, once again I can choose any of these languages from the drop-down list. As I mentioned, collation has to do with how things are sorted. So here it's using Latin 1. And we have different attributes that we can turn on and off. So you'll see that binary and binary 2 are grayed out. They're not options with this particular language. Those options are used for Unicode characters. Why would we use Unicode? Well, let's say that you need to store your information in Japanese or Chinese or some other language that cannot be represented with European characters. Now the difference between binary and binary 2 is that binary, this first one right here, is going to sort according to the bit settings of the characters, whereas binary 2 is going to use Unicode points. The first option, binary, is case sensitive and accent sensitive. Let's talk about case sensitivity. You'll see that my case sensitive is unchecked. So let's say that we have two strings. One of them is test, that's in all lowercase, and the other is test in all uppercases, or a combination of that. Since case sensitive is unchecked, they're going to be right next to each other in the sorting order. If we have case sensitive checked, then an uppercase T and a lowercase t are two completely different letters. The default is that it is not case sensitive. Now we have accent sensitive as well. Now in English, this probably won't make much of a difference. However, let's say that you have the word resume with no accents on there, and then you decide to use the word resume with an accent over the E. Those two words are completely different words if we have accent sensitive checked. This is going to make a huge difference in languages such as German and French, where they heavily use accents. An umlaut, those two dots over a character, that's also considered to be an accent. This also has a huge impact on the Chinese language. In Chinese, there's a phonetic alphabet called pinyin, and there's all sorts of accents that define the tonality of that letter. Then we have this option called kana sensitive. This is only for Japanese. Now the Japanese language has two different phonetic alphabets. One is called hiragana, which is used for Japanese words, and the other is katakana, which is used for foreign words. If we have this unchecked, then two pronunciations using two different character sets is going to be identical. If it's checked, then it's considered to be two completely different words. Then the last option here is width sensitive. Some characters are stored as 1 byte, other characters are stored as 2 bytes. So if you have the letter A stored as 1 byte and another letter A stored as 2 bytes, if we uncheck width sensitive, then they're identical. If we check width sensitive, then they're not. So once again, you can go ahead and check any of these options that you want. Just remember that these changes won't take effect until you restart the instance. Okay, so we'll just hit cancel right here. In addition to managing our language and collation, we can manage our different currencies. Sometimes you'll want to display monetary information in various currencies. For example, if we want to show the internet sales or the reseller sales not only in US dollars, but also, let's say, in euros and Great Britain pounds, then we can do that. Now, one of the common things we have for our currencies is a fact lookup table for the currency exchange rate. In fact, let's go ahead and create a new SSAS project, and we're going to look at some of the tables we have to work with. So I'm just going to say new project, and this will be an analysis services project. And we're going to right click on here and create a new data source. My server name is Julie1, and my database is AdventureWorks DW2008. And I'll just use the service account and then hit finish. Okay, so now we'll decide which tables we want to select from. So right click on data source views, and we're going to choose the tables that we're interested in. So let's first of all choose from our fact tables. We have fact reseller sales. We also have fact currency rate. If you say add related tables, we have the dim currency table as well as dim date. The different currency exchange rates can change depending on what the date is. And then maybe we're also interested in the product. And we'll go ahead and hit next. Now, if you want to browse through the different data just to see what we've got, you can do that. Let's just double click on our data source view, and let's just right click on our fact currency and explore the data. So you'll see that for this table right here, we have the currency key, which is number 3. If you scroll down here, you'll also see number 6 and number 14. We can look those up in another table in just a moment. And then here is the date key. It tells us the exchange rate at the end of that day for that particular day. So, of course, exchange rates can fluctuate. So that's our fact currency rate table. Now let's look at our currency table, the dim currency right here. Do the same thing, right click on it, explore the data. So essentially we have exchange rates for various currencies per day. Let's close this up. At this point we can right click on cubes and create a new cube. We're going to use existing tables. And my measure group tables, I want to measure two things. So we will select from our fact tables. And the only thing I want to measure from this table right here is the sales amount. And then on this table, the end of day rate. And now hit next and then finish. Now, as far as the dates that we're interested in, really I'm just interested in the order date. I don't care about the ship date or the due date, so I'll just delete these. They were just added automatically because there was that foreign key relationship there. So let's right click, delete that guy too. And there's a nice little tool that I'll show you in a moment that's going to perform the currency conversions for us. But before we do that, we need to set the properties for a couple attributes here. So looking at your dimensions here, if you double click on your date dimension right here, right click on here, go to properties, and you'll see that under type down here it shows up as regular. Instead of saying regular, we want to say that it is time type. And the other thing we want to do is hone in on our currency right here and right click on that, and we're going to say that the type is currency. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and right click on here and we'll process what we have. Close that window, and now we can go to our cube. So double click on your cube if it isn't already there, and go to cube and then say add business intelligence. So one of the options on here is the define currency conversion, and then we hit next, and it asks us what's the measure group that contains the exchange rates. Well, it's the fact currency rate. The pivot currency, so you'll see here that we have all these different numbers, but these are the currency keys, but we don't know what currency it maps onto. So we are going to have to make a change to our currency dimension here. I want you to hit cancel, go to your dimension here for currency, and if you hone in on this currency key right here, right click, go to properties, and just make sure, if you scroll down here, that the name column right now is set to none. Make sure you set it to currency name so you know what it is. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and look at our date right here and see what that is set to. Scroll down until you see the name column. Maybe we want the name column to be full date alternate key so we have a better idea of what's going on there. Okay, so now we can save what we have, and we're going to then double click on our cube right here. Go ahead and process this again. And now, just to make sure everything's intact correctly, we can double click on our currency right here. If you go to your browser right here, you'll see that the names are now showing up. Okay, so we can go ahead and go to our cube again, go to our business intelligence, and start this process again. So the pivot currency, in other words, the data that's actually in the sales amount, what is it based on? Well, that's actually based on the US dollar. And how we entered our exchange rates, let's go ahead and put in here euro. And this will be N US dollar per 1 euro, and then we hit next. And here is the measures dimension. The exchange rate measures, we only have one choice here, and then we hit next. Now this is a one-to-many relationship. In other words, facts are recorded in one currency, and the conversion is applied at the cube level with multiple target currencies. Now on this screen, we choose which currencies we want to have displayed. Now be careful with this, because even though there's all these different currencies, doesn't mean that we actually have data in there. Well, I happen to be familiar with the underlying table, and I know that there's information in there regarding euros, as well as the United Kingdom pound. So we'll just do those two currencies, and then we'll hit next. Now if you get a screen like this that gives you a warning, it just means that earlier you'd already created a currency conversion script, and you just get a choice of overwriting it or appending it. I'm just going to overwrite my existing one. If this is the first time you've done this, then you'll just hit the next screen. We hit next right here, and then we hit finish. And at this point, I will go ahead and process my cube. And now we're going to browse. Okay, so you'll see down here that we have reporting currency 1. If we expand this, you'll see that the different members here are euro, UK pound, and US dollar. And so we can actually just drag this over here. And then we can look at our sales amounts. So far, looks great. Now let's add another element here. Remember, we added our product table. If you expand this, you'll see that there's only the product key in there. We can change that. I'm going to go to my dimensions, and I'm going to double click on product right here. And you'll see I have all these different choices. I'm going to choose the English product name, bring that over there. and then we can reprocess this. Let's just right-click on our cube right here. It's automatically going to process that modified dimension, and then we're going to drag it onto our cube browser. So far, so good. We can hit close there, and now I'm going to go to my cube and then go to the browser, and I'm just going to drag on, well, we need to refresh this here. Here's my product, here's my English product name. Drag that onto there, and there we have it. You can additionally filter information if you want to. For example, if you hit this drop down and go to your reporting currency, you might decide that you want to drill down to the currency key and say that it's equal to, let's drag this over here a little bit, and we can say perhaps just the UK pound. And there's our result set. Now, next I want to show you how translations work. Oftentimes you're going to have clients that are in a different locale. Maybe your clients are French speaking, German speaking, maybe it's Chinese. And what you can provide, either on the database level, the dimension level, or the cube level, is what we call a translation. A translation just defines a set of mappings. So the key is going to be a language identifier, and the value is the actual label that's going to show up. And when a client connects with SQL Server, it automatically looks at the locale, and then it decides which translation to use, if any. Let's say that your default language is English, and let's say you've defined a translation for German, French, and Cantonese. Cantonese is a form of Chinese. Now there's other forms of Chinese as well, for example, Taiwanese. If somebody from Germany connects, it's going to use the German locale. Let's say somebody from Taiwan connects. Even though you have a translation for Cantonese, it's going to use the closest match. So it's in the same family, so the Taiwanese person is going to be using the Cantonese translation. If there isn't a language in the same family available, then it just falls back to the default language. So let's say somebody from Thailand decides to connect and there isn't a Thai translation, it will default to English. As I mentioned, you can define these translations either on the database, the dimension, or the cube level. Let's first of all define it on the dimension level. So what I want you to do is, here you have your dimensions. Go ahead and click on your reporting currency. So if you double click on there, and then you'll see these different tabs. Let's go to translations. Now under translations here, you'll see that we already have our default language, and these things right in here, this whole column, it's all grayed out because we're not going to be editing that, at least from here. Okay, but you can add as many translations as you want. So see this little icon right up here, new translation? Let's create a German translation. So scroll all the way down. I like to use the very general locales. So the Germany locale is the standard one, and everything else is in that family there. And so here you can add either hard-coded captions, or you can grab information from a drop-down menu. Okay, so here we'll say, I'll type right in here the German word for that, and then we can, fill in the blanks as much as we need to. I'm just going to give you a couple examples here. You can also perform translation on the cube level. So let's go to our cube, click on this next to last tab right here. Let's click on this next to last tab right here, which is for translations, and you'll see here once again we have the English language, and if we want to add a translation, just click on that icon right there. So once again, this is going to be German. Now the example I gave you a moment ago was just using static captions. I'm going to give you one more example of a static caption. We'll put in here Datum for the date. And now I want to show you an example of something that's a little more dynamic. You can reference a column in a table to be the label. So the way you do that, let's go back to our dimensions right here. Let's go to our dim product. And you'll see here that we've got our product key, and we have our English product name. We can also click on here and say that we're going to do a German description. Okay, so hit OK right there. And now we can just right-click on our cube and process this. Now we can test this. I'm going to double-click on my cube here and go to the browser. And when I hit refresh, everything should just look the same here. However, if I change the language in this drop-down, you'll see a difference in behavior. So let's choose German. Okay, so there we have the German descriptions. I know they're a little bit longer than the English ones, but there we've got it. Okay. Now let's change the language here once again. Let's make it Swiss German. You'll see that we still get the same behavior, even though we didn't explicitly add a Swiss German translation. Now, if we decided to add a Swiss German translation, then that would override the standard German. Let's review what we learned in this nugget. We first of all discussed the language and collation settings. Now when you're dealing with collation, that has to do with the sorting order, and you can choose options such as binary, binary 2, width sensitive, CONA sensitive, accent sensitive, and so on. Not every language is going to support binary sorting. For example, Latin, which is what we were using, does not support it. Also keep in mind that if you go into your SQL Server Management Studio and change any of those options, that you will have to restart the instance for those changes to be seen. We then created a cube that had different currencies displaying. You can have a lookup table which shows the currencies for that day or the average currency, and if you use the Business Intelligence Wizard, it will ask you all the necessary questions to set up the currency translation. The thing to remember with this is that you need to have a dimension which is of currency type and another dimension which is of time type. Then the last thing we covered are translations. You can provide as many translations as you want which support various languages, and the translation that is used will be completely dependent upon the client language set. Remember that you can define these translations on the cube level and the dimension level. Well, I hope this has been informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.